Welcome back to Division I Rejects. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo. It's episode 134. Had a lot of fun stuff to talk about last episode. We've got a couple good ones today. Otherwise, a lot of recapping for you. Week 6, I believe. Week 6 was a really exciting one. We will talk about a lot of D2 games. We got Jimmy joining me here later, so we'll get into that Division 3 side of things. We have a new NAIA insider that'll be joining us, not this week, but probably next week. So NAIA people, definitely be looking out for that. I want to get more coverage on there. Like I talked about on the show a little bit, I feel like I'm pretty plugged into D2 now. Jimmy helps me out with D3, and I'm definitely learning a lot. The NAIA scene is tough, man. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, and admittedly, not as much coverage. That's why we need to step in, right? That's why we need to step in and start to provide some of that, but we'll continue to do that. This is October 9th. We've got a couple nice things to talk about. Mike Tomlin with a little bit of a D2 shout-out in one of his pressers, the head coach from the Steelers. I'll watch that video and react to that here in a little bit. Otherwise, we got another Power 10 rankings from Wayne Cavadi as far as Division 2 is concerned. A ton of great recaps. Had some overtime wins, some upsets, some teams taking care of business. We had 2 massive game-winning field goals that if you follow us on any of the socials, you already saw them. Otherwise, you can watch this episode on YouTube. Don't forget, if you are watching on YouTube's timestamps, bottom of the screen, chapters, fast forward any part of the conversation. And those will be on the Spotify, the Apple Podcasts, you name it. Follow us on the socials. Do not forget to subscribe on the YouTube, please. Let's jump right into this thing. Let's get into the D2 side of things. And I kind of want to lead off with this. The Mike Tomlin shout-out. We're going to watch this clip here as I pull it up. He was asked about something along the lines of like rivalries and other things. And you'll see the tweet here as I bring it on the screen. It says, he knows his Division II college football rivals in Minnesota. And the quote is right on the screen. But what's better than the quote? Let's just sit here and listen to the man himself say it.
Guys have been in significant matchups before. So if you went to Alabama or Auburn, I say it's like the Iron Bowl. If you went to Bemidji State, I said it's like Bemidji Mankato.
I would love to know what the context for this was. Like, I don't know what the question. I couldn't hear the question. Don't really know what was going on. Still distracted by the fact that it says Acrisure and not Heinz Field behind him. But Bemidji Mankato, what a random poll from Coach there. I love it. And I'm trying to think, did he have coaching experience at one of those? At one of those spots? That's what I would like to know, and I don't see any of it, to be honest with you. Virginia Military Institute, University of Memphis, University of Tennessee at Martin, Arkansas State, Cincinnati, and then he gets into the NFL. No experience with any of those teams in Minnesota, which I didn't think he did, but you never know. Sometimes these guys have pretty humble beginnings and they just show up here. So I wonder what prompted the random poll, but I know, especially after that crazy top 10 matchup over there in Bemidji just last week, I know that Mankato and Bemidji were both eating that up. They love a little press. Definitely from a guy like Mike Tomlin, man. That's pretty hard to turn down. But let's talk about Wayne Cavadi, his new Power 10, if you will, the top 10 rankings, which, as I pull them up here, you will notice one thing about them. Let's see. There you have it. And they stay, for the most part, the same. And I think they're actually almost exactly the same. Yeah. They remain the same. There you have it. You got Ferris State at number 1, followed by School of Mines, with Pittsburgh State and Grand Valley State tied at 3rd. Mankato at 5th, not penalized by that very close game against Moorhead. So I know some people were like, oh, you went to the wire against an unranked MSU Moorhead team. I mean, that game was fantastic, but I'm glad to see they were not penalized for that. Ouachita sits at number 6, followed by Delta State, West Florida, 2 Gulf South opponents that will actually meet here very shortly. I think not this week, but the following week for the Gulf South title matchup. Same thing with Ferris State and Grand Valley. That Anchor Bone Classic, I do believe, is coming this weekend. So you've got 2 top 10 matchups there, even just in the next 2 weeks. We'll see about those other squads. Harding at number 9 and Slippery Rock coming in at 10. So a good conference spread. The GLIAC and the GSC both represented well in that top 10. And if you read kind of what he had, I'll pull up the link here, kind of what he had to say about these top 10 squads, we can dive into that a little bit more. But a lot of it's just kind of all in the same. The big game, and we're going to talk about that in a second. We can actually just jump into it right now, is that Delta State and Valdosta State game was not exactly what I was expecting, although I will admit I'm not surprised that Delta State won. It's just not exactly for the reasons that I was expecting, if that makes sense, because the Delta State run game was incredible. They had 417 yards, the Statesmen did, over the Blazers, and that's something that I certainly was not expecting, but, you know, as far as VSU was concerned, their passing game was definitely what had been keeping them in it, and I guess some of my other key takeaways here from Delta State, Patrick Shigog, their, like, All-American-esque quarterback, he's not alone. Like, when he has a day where he isn't putting up these absurd numbers, he was our player of the week, not this week, but I believe 2 weeks ago, with like 7 total touchdowns accounted for. When he's not having that kind of production, he was 8 for 13, 112, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, with an additional, 9 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So, not exactly Superman numbers from him. His teammates stepped up big time. Kevin Smith out of the backfield with 181 yards and 3 tuds. You had another 100-yard rusher in Christy Malloy with 115. Like, they were pounding the rock, didn't really get it done through the air, did not matter. I'm sure Delta State would not have it any other way. And what's crazy about that, too, you think, oh, they pound the rock, didn't win the time possession, 26 to 33 minutes there. Valdosta State had the ball for a large amount of this. Sammy Edwards, that's where this comes into play. I talk about their passing offense for Valdosta really being the thing that I thought was going to keep them in this game. They've been super efficient. Sammy Edwards and that passing offense has been a top 10 in the country, I believe, at this far through the season, maybe even top 5. And the other day, that was not the case. 25 for 37, not a bad stat. 285 yards. Well, where's the catch, Kobe? No touchdowns, 3 interceptions for Edwards on the day. And when you are turning the ball over like that, that'd be where, you know, you think about the time possession piece. You're driving down the field. You're obviously making big plays, driving. Then that turnover happens. So you're still possessing the ball for a large amount of time, but they're just, those drives aren't ending in any points. No field goals, no touchdowns, nothing, because the ball's being taken away. And with a Delta State team that was dominating the line of scrimmage like they were, you just can't afford to do that. Now, 2 turnovers from Delta State, too, probably kept Valdosta in this, because if those weren't there, this game might have been blown open, to be honest with you. Still a lot of bright points for Valdosta. They got a long ways to go this year. Still some big matchups. There's still some very big prove-it games for them as far as the Gulf South Conference is concerned. But, I mean, all in all, just the rushing attack was the biggest thing for me. 417 yards on the ground to 174 from the Blazers. That's incredible. Delta State also did not punt in the entire contest. Holy shit. I didn't know that one going into this. I'm not going to lie. Man. 5 for 7 on 3rd down, Delta State, and then 1 of 2 on 4th. Like, just very efficient. Had 3 sacks on the day, too, to Valdosta's none. So, you know, great game for Delta State. Shigog is not alone. The running game very much going to help that quarterback out through the stretch. Now, number 17, Emporia State, and number 3, Pitt State. You look at the final score of this one, I think you're going to be deceived. Emporia State lost 25 to 33. Oh, that must have been a wire-to-wire, like, tough contest for the Gorillas. Yeah, actually, it wasn't anything but that. They were up 30 to 3 going into the 4th quarter. And this is the same Pitt State team where I've joked pretty often about them being just a slow starting team, not having shit going for them offensively in the first half, but their defense is so good that when their offense finally starts clicking in the second half, doesn't matter. They're still in the game. And still winning because they are undefeated, a perfect 6-0 now. But 30 to 3 for Pittsburgh State heading into the 4th quarter. And then all of a sudden, Braden Gleason comes alive for the Hornets there. And he had a 34-yard touchdown pass with 14 to go. Then another one with 10 minutes ago with 7-yarder. And then in the final 2 minutes, a 14-yard touchdown pass. And it's 25-33. They're down by 8 points. That's a 1-score football game. So I do have to imagine that got a little bit dicey there. This was at Pitt State in the jungle, over 10,000 in attendance for this one. One of the best atmospheres in Division II football. You've seen the Gorilla Walk where they come out. While I'm talking about it, let me actually try and find the tweet to show you the picture, because, oh my gosh. Like I said, this is probably one of the best. Oh, wait, this is a good one, too. I might have to pull that up. This is probably one of the best just overall environments as far as Division II football is concerned. And I'm going to scroll here and try and find the image that I'm looking for. But their tight end, Devin Garrison, also had another day. We talked about him, the unicorn. We had him on the show just a few weeks ago, and he has continued to absolutely impress. He's been a very consistent piece of that offense. They know exactly what they're getting from him. Here is the walk. I'm going to pull this up here on the big screen for y'all to check out because this is pretty sick. From Pitt State Athletics, here come the Gorillas. And this is what they call... I'm going to mute that so it's not raging over me. But this is the Gorilla Walk heading into the stadium. And it did not mute. You son of a bitch. Mute. Thank you. There we go. This is the Gorilla Walk down there in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Look at this scene. This is incredible. Look at, you've got that gorilla statue too, like up on the right there. Right up here, you can't see my cursor on the screen, damn it. But you see that gorilla statue. That is incredible. The turnout of these people, you can't beat this. Like, this is a Division I-esque environment, and this is every week, guys. Like, I know this is a top 25 matchup they're going to show out. The gorilla fan base shows up like this for every single matchup. That's my understanding of it. Have I been there? No. I could be bullshitting, but that is my understanding of it. The band is there. Everyone comes out. This is really impressive for a Division II squad. This is really impressive for anyone. Screw that. Screw Division II squad. Look at the top of the screen right there. Oh, my God. So awesome. Shout out Pittsburgh State. Still undefeated. Still unblemished on the record. Talk about some of the stats from the day. Chad Dodson, 15 for 24, 2 touchdowns, 254 yards. Not taking anything away from him. He was balling. But Braden Gleason also ended up having quite the day. He did throw the ball 51 times, completed 35 of them for 310 and 3 tuds. Then in the passing game, Devin Garrison, like I said, they had 200-yard receivers for the Gorillas. Devin Garrison was the top one. 7 catches for 111, 2 tuds. He is a dominant threat in the red zone. And then you got Jack Roberts, 4 for 103, had a long 58-yard touchdown for them. And then Tyler Common for ESU, 12 for 140 and 2 tuds. My goodness. And I know it was like 30-3, and they're probably just airing the ball out, trying to come back. I don't care. These stats are, that's an offensive shootout. I think. At least by whatever means I'm judging it by. Pittsburgh State did dominate the line of scrimmage. 159 yards to 87 rushing of the Hornets. They're pretty good at that. Pittsburgh State is, they're pretty good at that. Otherwise, just another solid. I just combined solid and quality. It was a solid win for the Gorillas, and looking forward on their schedule as far as what other matchups they have coming down the pipeline. They're at Missouri Southern and at Northwest Missouri these next couple of weeks, which will be an interesting contest. And they have their lone non-conference game home against Sioux Falls. And then this last couple games do intrigue me. The week, what's this, week 6? So week 10 at Missouri Western. Obviously, the Northwest Missouri game, going to be very competitive. Even the Missouri Southern game, I could be surprised. But that Missouri's Western squad, I'm very interested to see what they look like in 4 weeks, because that could end up being a very big contest as it concerns the MIAA and the standings in there. But we can move over to the PSAC. Let's talk a little bit about that. Number 22, Shepherd at Lock Haven. This is a game that last week in the previews I said, put a soft upset alert on this one for the Bald Eagles. I'm all in on Dan Mulrooney and the gang over there and what they've been able to do offensively. They didn't get it done. Shepherd showed up big. I think I need to put a little more respect on Shepherd's name. They lost a lot of big-time players and guys like Bajan and Brown and Fisher. And these guys were all, trying to make it at the next level. A couple of them are certainly doing that. Shepherd reminded me they're still very much that team, even with Seth Morgan under center. He was surgical, 25 for 36, 302 tuds, no interceptions. He made it look easy out there. He had 2 receivers over 100 yards, guys who last year I didn't even know about, and Barry Hill and Jeremiah Taylor. My apologies, fellas. Balled out 118 and 104 yards, respectively, a touchdown to both their names. And it's not to say Lock Haven's offense was incredibly lackluster, but the number, again, it comes back to turnovers. 4 interceptions on the day for LHU. You're not going to be able to win a game with those kind of statistics. But again, Shepherd continues to step up in the PSAC. You look at their lone loss, the upset versus Kutztown, which was at home, a very surprising loss, only scored 3 points. Otherwise, this team has looked impressive. The knock I think I had on them was that this is technically their most comfortable victory. You look at their schedule here. They win in week 1 versus Southern Connecticut by 1 point. Then they go at Edinburgh, beat them by 7. Then at California, Pennsylvania, win by 10. Then they win by 7 versus Shippensburg. They finally put one together, it feels like, against Lock Haven. They win by 17, a little bit more of a comfortable win as far as the PSAC East standings are concerned. And is that because they had 4 interceptions? Probably. But that, for me, is going to be the sign of if Shepherd can actually continue to take the next steps and still make an impact in the postseason, because I was not expecting nearly as much from them this year as I was in years past. They've got some big games coming up. Millersville is next week for the Rams. Not an easy team to go against. Westchester looks really good right now. They've got them for their homecoming game at home the week after. And then you've got a Bloomsburg team, which shouldn't be much of a problem. But that East Stroudsburg game in week 10, certainly eyeing the Rams down. That could be some much-watched football. But this Westchester squad, I think, will be a very good game to watch. Looking at, let me see here. Right now, they sit at 4-2. Those 2 losses coming to a top 10 Slippery Rock team, and then Millersville at Millersville. So these next 2 weeks for Shepherd, I think, is going to tell you all you need to know about the Rams and if they are going to be that perennial playoff team, or if this is a year where they do take a step down. If they can come out of this PSAC East, you never know what's going to happen. But our game of the week, MSU Moorhead at number 5, Minnesota State. I've got some crazy stats for you right here. I don't know if you're ready for these ones. MSU Moorhead, let me talk about the score first before I get into these wild stats. And for those of you who live under a rock, Mankato, the number 5 team in the country, wins 24-21 over the Dragons from Moorhead. And it took a, 34-yard field goal from Matthew Yeager with 4 seconds left to win this one for Mankato at home. Oh, gotta pop the neck there. And that's not a crazy stat. No, it's not. The crazy stat is that Moorhead had 72 total offensive snaps, 66 of which were passing attempts, and 5 of which were quarterback scrambles. So if you're a mathematician at home, 66 passes and 5 scrambles, that means they had 1 run to someone that was not named Jack Strand. What? I've never seen that. Right now, as it sits, Moorhead is throwing the ball 76% of the time this year. And the thing is, they're doing it very well. Jack Strand is currently number 2 in the country in passing yards, less than 100 behind Zach Zabrowski from Central Missouri. 2,235 yards on the year already. That's just passing yards. Then you look at passing touchdowns, also number 2 behind Zabrowski with 22 touchdowns on the year in 6 games. Almost 4 passing touchdowns a game for Strand. Like I said, though, they are currently throwing the ball 76% of the time. In this game, he was 37 for 66, 384 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The biggest stat for me, though, this man cocked his arm back and threw the ball through the air 66 times. Not once did it go into the hands of a Mankato defender. In a secondary that we know has stepped up and made very big plays time and time again over there from Minnesota State. That is very impressive. Hayden Ekern for MSU Mankato, obviously 21 for 31, 219 and a tud. That's big time. Shen Butler Lawson finishing with 58 yards. They kept him in check. I would expect him to bounce back entirely, to have another great couple of games here as they go down the stretch. I'm sure that probably pissed him off. I know it would if I were him, because you look at his trajectory right now as far as like Harlan Hill candidate goes. You can't string together. Having one of those games, it happens, right? Especially as a running back. Some days you can't get it going for whatever reason, right? And it's kudos to MSU offense, MSU Moorhead offense as well. But if you do want to be in contention for those awards, what you can't do is string 2 of those games together consecutively. Look for him to have a big week this next week for them. And I said it, the 1 run for Moorhead, Tyson Powell had 1 run for 2 yards. Otherwise, Jack Strand had 5 attempts for negative 32 yards. Those attempts were actually all sacks. 4 of the 5. Yep. Gage Florence had 152 and 14 catches for the Dragons, followed by Madden Thorson, 9 catches for 111 and 2 tuds. Man, I'm telling you, they're getting it done. Their defense stepped up and made some pretty big plays, had some big PBUs, had about 5 TFLs in the day. At the end of the day, this was not enough. Really contained Mankato on the ground was not enough. You have to be able to possess the ball if you're Moorhead. I can't understand it. But we've got 3 other games to cover here as far as the D2 slate goes. The next one is number 13, Lenore-Rhyne at Limestone. The Bears continuing their undefeated streak. They win in overtime, I do believe, 31-28. And I guess the player of the game for me in this one, Trey Stewart, the running back from Limestone, one of the candidates for our Player of the Week award, not quite get it. 14 attempts for 217. No touchdowns, though, which is pretty wild. You're averaging 15 a pop. You had one run that went 68 yards, and you didn't get into the end zone. I didn't watch the film. I don't know what the situations were, but that was just kind of jumped out at the stat book at me. Lenore-Rhyne, some of the notes I just had takeaways in this one. The special teams play from Lenore-Rhyne is winning them games. It's not keeping them in games. It's not losing them. It's winning them games. Lenore-Rhyne, for me, that's what's doing it. There was an 84-yard block field goal touchdown from TJ Blanding. That was the 3rd field goal block this year for the Bears. That is an incredible stat. Jake Brown was 3 for 4 on field goals. He's 6 for 8 on the year. He hasn't missed from 40 yards or less. Like, that's very impressive. He has a couple, those 2 misses were both pretty long shots, and I'm sure he will end up swinging those back around and making those. But for me, that was kind of the biggest note because you only have 112 yards through the air. You did get it done on the ground. Dwayne McGee, not discredit him, 24 carries for 141 and a tud, or 130 net yardage and a tud. Possessed it on the ground. The offensive attack right now for Lenore-Rhyne, not really there. And you think about it, 112 yards. The one was a 46-yard pass to Malachi Sumner, who we posted on our story. Absolute grab from the kid. That was incredible to watch. You take away that 46-yard reception, all of a sudden, you're at what, like 70 yards passing? So Lenore-Rhyne right now, not to say they got bailed out, but man, they got bailed out. I'm not going to lie to you. I feel like they got bailed out. And you counter with that and say, Kobe, good teams make those kind of situations for themselves. And what's crazy about that too is they've had some extremely impressive offensive outputs already this year. Look at last week over UVA-Wise, 56-3. They beat Erskine 62-0. And they opened the year with St. Augustine's 45-7. Like, this team has offensive capabilities. Their next 3 weeks, let me tell you, gauntlet. Home versus Barton, at Newberry, at Wingate. As far as the SAC, the SAC goes, it does not get tougher than that if you're Lenore-Rhyne. So this stretch right here for them, it's great that they got the win over Limestone, heading into that with a little bit of momentum, but this is going to be very tough for them. Special teams, you hope it can continue, but that offense needs to catch its stride here for the Bears. California, Pennsylvania at IUP, the Coal Bowl, the rivalry. And before I talk about who won, who lost, Cal and IUP have alternated wins in the annual Coal Bowl every year since the 2013 campaign. Think about that for a minute. This is not a one-sided rivalry. This is a very true-to-form rivalry. California, PA comes out on top of this one, 30-20 over the Crimson Hawks. And that drops IUP to 3-3, which is crazy. 1-2 in conference play. Not something I would have expected before this year if you'd have told me that. This one, relatively one-sided. As far as, Cal had the lead the entire second half. Still a very competitive game. I don't want to make it sound like that, but Cal did maintain, a pretty solid lead. In this one, they had 3 different quarterbacks under center for IUP, which is always an interesting tactic. Otherwise, Davis Black for the Vulcans had 12 for 28, not a great completion percentage, 261 and a pick. Not exactly the best offensive output game for either of these guys, but defensively, Drew Denuzio Bliss, how about 17 tackles, a sack, 2 TFLs, and 9 solo for the kid? Had another guy in Tyrone Fowler Jr. with 11 tackles in the day, 1.5 sacks, 3 TFLs. They had a couple guys getting it done on the defensive side of things. California, PA, all of a sudden, poised to finish out the year pretty strong. We pull up their schedule and look at what's going on with them the rest of the year. As I do that, they're sitting at 4-1 currently. Their one loss coming to what was then number 14 Shepherd team. And looking forward, versus Seton Hill this next week for their homecoming game. Then they're at Slippery Rock, which is going to be a tough one. Then they close the year out with East Stroudsburg. So there's certainly a lot of room to make some noise here in the PSAC West for this squad. I'm certainly interested to see how they finish this one. But Byko, the kicker, converted 3 field goals for the 5th time in his career, now ranks 3rd all-time in school history with 33 field goals. How about that? That's pretty impressive. And I guess another great stat for you is that the Vulcans held IUP to only 209 yards of total offense. That's a great one for them. But finally, as far as more coverage goes, we've got number 17, Minnesota Duluth at Wayne State College. This one, here's your upset alert for the week. The Wildcats, I believe, from Wayne State, 28-18 over the what was the undefeated Bulldogs from Duluth. This one, kind of a surprising one for me. And I think looking ahead of this game, I would have said, if a team wants to beat Duluth, you have to contain Wall Jasper, not through the air, but on the ground. Okay, he's been getting shit done on the ground. Their starting quarterback for Duluth is built like a cross between a middle linebacker and an interior D lineman. The dude's big as hell. And he can run, though. Like, not to take anything away from him. He can run. Still had 126 yards on the ground and a touchdown, but his long was a 29-yard run. So they did at least hold him to not anything too crazy. Yeah, 30-yard run's pretty nuts. But you should see some of the runs this kid's had over the course of this year. They kept him very limited in the passing attack. 8 for 18 for Wall Jasper, the pick, and 1 touchdown to go along with that. Nick Bond for the Wildcats, I believe, was the conference player of the week for them. He finishes with 145 through the air and 55 on the ground with 3 touchdowns total. No turnovers. Big time for the kid. And the Wayne State defense absolutely stepped up. That was for me kind of the takeaway from this one. Dexter Larson, their leading tackler, with 10 tackles on the day. And then Joe Morrison with a pick and a 46-yard return. Those are the kind of plays that are going to make you win these kind of games. So, very back and forth in this one. Quite a few lead changes, but when it came to the second half, it felt like Wayne State was kind of in control for the majority of it. Got close, came to a 3-point game, but Wayne State never lost the lead there in the second half. That's huge for them. A team that was expected to make a lot of noise this year in the NSIC. They are certainly living up to the hype. Only 1 loss on their schedule as of now. But before we talk about some more D2 stuff, I want to talk our Player of the Week awards, guys. We didn't get to that earlier. I don't know why I skipped over that one, but let's pull up the most recent Player of the Week awards. Here you are. Kamani Clark from Virginia State University over Bowie State, a really solid defense in that squad over there. 21 carries, 241 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Whew. Another great candidate for this one would have been Jay Harris out of Northwest Missouri State, but we felt that the competition that he was playing against was potentially a little bit better. Their stat line super comparable. Jay Harris did have a hell of a game, though, too. So shout out to Jay. That's our Offensive Player of the Week for the D2 scene. Defensively, Isaiah Powell Major. I don't even know if I can read all these stats, guys. I almost ran out of room on the fucking graphic. 4 tackles, a tackle for loss, a forced fumble, 2 interceptions, 2 PBUs, and one of those interceptions was a 97-yard return for a touchdown. That's a program record. Hello. It's his first year playing for the Falcons over there at Fairmont State. How about Kevin Powell from UMary? 7 punts with a 48-yard average and a long of 70? 5 of the 7 were inside of 20, and 3 of them were 50-plus yards. That's kind of a dream stat line from a punter. I mean, I'm not one, but I'm just going to go ahead out there on a limb and assume that. Can we get Pat McAfee on here to confirm? Feels incredible. D'Angelo Hardy, the wide receiver from North Central. How about 7 catches to the tune of 278 and 4 touchdowns for the kid? They won big this week. No surprise there. Incredible performance. Jack Connolly, we talked about his stat line and their overtime win versus RPI. Then you've got James Martino from Aurora. Yes, Kobe, should the kicker from lacrosse be the Player of the Week? He probably will from every other place. I thought these stats speak for themselves. Not to take anything away from the lacrosse kid. He probably was going to be our pick until I saw the stats that James put up. 4 punt returns, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an additional kick return for 51 yards. Automatic, like electricity in a bottle when this guy gets the ball. Finally, NAIA side of things. Darian Williams, 18 carries for 288 and 3 tuds. And then 4 catches for 22 yards. Indiana Wesleyan, still the number 4 team, the team to beat for me in the NIAA. NAIA. I'm getting shit all mixed up. I've been talking way too long, guys. He's our Offensive Player of the Week. Defensively, we had Kamorian Larkin, 15 tackles, 12 of them solo. Had a great piece to play in Point University's big win over Bluefield. And finally, Drew Rader. You can see those stats there for yourself. The kid from Georgetown. Great game from him. We can talk about some other quick D2 stuff here as far as scores go before I leave you with this episode. Let me go through and talk about a couple other quick games as I pull this up. Wi-Fi, hello. There we are. Okay. Sweet. Barton with a solid SAC win over Newberry, 34-14. Jordan Terrell back at it on the ground. He had a much more productive game. Good to see that from him and from those guys. Wingate pulls out a number of Catawba, 31-13. Central Missouri, this Nebraska Kearney team I thought might have given the Mules a little bit of fight. CMU currently at 18 in the country, 38-14. They handle them incredibly well. And moving through, Colorado Mines has been dominant. Sorry, I haven't talked about y'all a lot. Colorado Mines, 52-0. 52-0 over Colorado Mesa, a pretty respectable squad. Just not much to say there. Not much to say, honestly. Davenport picks up what was kind of a close win against Northern Michigan, although the Northern NMU, we scored a touchdown like the very last second. So a lot of turnovers from Davenport. That game could have been, and probably should have been blown open quite a bit more. Davenport cannot turn the ball over like that if they want to beat some more quality opponents. Otherwise, Millersville falls to East Stroudsburg in a big PSAC matchup. And then you had Ferris State, who actually, Saginaw Valley was hanging with them for about that first half right there. They end up pulling it out 38-17 in a pretty convincing fashion. Otherwise here, Grand Valley State dominated. Indianapolis had a really good showing. We talked about Lenore-Rhine. Moving through here, Slippery Rock put up 75 points against Mercyhurst. UTPB, Permian Basin, they pick up another quality win. Benedict had themselves a little bit of a scare. Number 12 team in the country. Miles put up 24 points on what's supposed to be one of the better defenses in D2. They still pull out the victory, 27-24. And finally, there were a couple other ones I wanted to mention here. Northwest Missouri State, that's one of them. 34-21 over UCO, Central Oklahoma. Northwest Missouri still showing they are a quality squad. They've had a couple tough losses. They can certainly rebound. Here is the one I wanted to at least talk about a little bit here. Northwood over Findlay. 33-30. They block a kick at the end of the game to seal that one, to ice it, if you will. This is a game that Northwood in years past, no business winning that game. Whether it be a new energy, a new coaching staff, Coach Bureau over there, I couldn't put my finger on all the intangibles. Had a lot of buddies that played on there. They're pumped about this one. And I say this in the nicest way possible. This is an uncharacteristic Northwood win for an uncharacteristic Northwood team, at least in recent history. Shout out to the Timberwolves. That is a huge win over one of the perennial contenders in the GMAC in that Findlay squad. But that kind of wraps it up. I don't think there's anything else too crazy I wanted to touch on here. Texas A&M Kingsville picks up a close win over West Texas A&M, 28-21. That defense stepped up secondary for Kingsville. And finally, Truman State holds off Quincy. That one a lot closer than I expected, 33-27 for Truman State. All right, Jim, let's start it up, dude. The game of the week is a pretty easy one. We do the Game of Week awards every week. This was probably the easiest choice, given what's at stake in conference play, the amount of freaking people that were at the game. Lacrosse wins a thriller over Whitewater, 37-34 on that ridiculous game-winning field goal. I don't know if I can get it up while we're both sitting here, but in post, Kobe, insert clip now. Perfect. What a clip. The scene was electric. Obviously, neither of us were there, but seeing it from probably 8 different angles was fucking incredible.
Yeah, that thing was a nuke. I think it was 51 yards. I saw a tweet this morning. Some kid on the lacrosse football team tweeted. He's like, I think it's Michael Stack. I think he's like, yeah, Michael Stack is the king of lacrosse. The kid
That's awesome.
A 51-yarder to beat Whitewater on the road.
Dude, in front of supposedly 20,113 fans over there.
I did see that attendance. That's absurd. I mean, I've been to Perkins Stadium a few times. There's obviously like a huge like seated area, but there's also like tons of like standing room area as well.
Yeah, and so that broke the record for the on-campus Division III football game. The overall record still held by the Cortica Jug game between Ithaca and SUNY Cortland. I was at that one in MetLife. That was incredible. But as far as on-campus games go, this one now takes the cake.
Yeah, that's 20,000 people. Holy, that's ridiculous, man.
It is. Something that we were talking about a little bit is Kaiser Helterbrand and the way that he's at least kind of transformed in this offense. Not very much your typical quarterback per se. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so Kaiser had he's 10 for 16, 105 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. And then he ran the ball 25 times for 100 yards, and then he caught 2 balls for 39 yards. So he's just kind of like a Swiss Army knife, if you will. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's just really good, really, really good football player. So yeah, I just tip the cap to a kid like that. And then Zach Wire, I know I keep watching this kid's name. Last week I did it too, but Zach big game as well. And anytime you throw 2 touchdowns against Whitewater, you've probably had a pretty good game.
Incredibly efficient, too. I mean, 9 for 12, takes care of the ball. Obviously, no giveaways from either of those guys. That's key in a game where the Warhawks, it felt like the moral of the story was self-inflicted wounds, and they're going to have to do a lot of evaluating in this next week because they don't get a break. We know, talking about their schedule here in the next couple of weeks. But that, for me, was the biggest thing looking back and trying to peep some of the film is, like, lacrosse was very opportunistic. When the Warhawks faltered for even a play or a series or maybe just didn't get the momentum going, lacrosse was immediately there to capitalize on that. And that's what you have to do that against really good teams. Now, Tamir Thomas out of the backfield for Whitewater. On 14 carries, they held him under 100 yards. That's no small feat. He's been a very consistent model of success out of the backfield for Whitewater. Alec Ogden has been, I think, pretty consistently solid for the Warhawks. I don't see him as a quarterback that's going to go out of his way to win you games, but he certainly is not going to lose them for you either. He still put up some pretty respectable stats. But I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to some really big performances from lacrosse. Jack Studer's another one, 6 catches for 150. One of those being an 84-yard touchdown. I mean, those kind of explosive plays are what's going to elevate you above that. And lacrosse defensively was super spread out. They didn't have a guy with over 7 tackles in the day, which is, you could say, oh, maybe not, anyone standing out. That means everyone is flying to the ball. Everyone's getting there making plays. And that was something for me that definitely stood out. And the kick itself, dude, we watched it. That was class.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you play football right there. It's for
That's
games
why,
like that.
hell yeah, dude.
That's why you play it. So
I love that. But talk about moving forward, at least for lacrosse first. You look at, they're 4-1 right now. Their one loss coming at home versus Hardin-Simmons, and you look for these next couple of weeks at Platteville this next week, but you still have on the schedule a home game in 2 weeks from now against Oshkosh, and then you're at River Falls a week before you close out the year. There's still a lot of work to be done for the Eagles over there, right?
at River Falls.
Lacrosse.
Oh, lacrosse. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Eagles,
no, River Falls Falcons. But yeah, so still a lot of work to be done there. Not to mention, you got a team over there in Eau Claire, and you don't know what Platteville could potentially give them a challenge. So those are not skip over games for them. No shot at Stevens Point at the end of the year, but I expect that one to be kind of a cruise for them.
Yeah.
But either way, Whitewater, is right back in the mix of things this next week. We'll talk about some of the new rankings that come out after we go over some recaps, man. But currently, River Falls is the number 4 team in the country. Whitewater is at their place this weekend. I mean, you can look at it one of two ways, right? This could be 2 weeks in a row where Whitewater gets knocked down a peg, or is this the best time for a bounce-back game ever?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have an opportunity to play the number 4 team in the country, I mean, those two would essentially probably just swap if Whitewater were to win that game. Now, obviously, if Whitewater were to lose, though, that'd be 2 losses. Like, does Whitewater get in the playoffs with 2 losses? Like, and then it's kind of like muddy water. Yeah. Now, you don't want to drop 2. You don't want to drop 2 games,
No,
especially
and even if they are
in
against the number
conference.
4 and the number 14 teams in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is tough, but we won't spend too long on it, but we'll talk a little bit about Oshkosh because of the offensive performance that they had against your Blue Devils down there. 48-46 over Stout in a late night Pac-12 Maction-esque shootout of a game over there. And just highlighting some of those big-time performances, at least individually. Kobe Berghammer, 42 for 52, 466 with 5 tuds, no turnovers. There were a couple different records he broke because he also had 105 on the ground. You talked about it, man. That dude does it all for the Titans. What did you see from him?
Yeah, he ran for 100 yards as well. So
Yep.
you gotta see, like, he had a record-breaking performance, and they won the game. I just gotta tip the cap to him. Yeah, I mean, he made more plays than we did. I mean, that's what it comes down to ultimately. But yeah, 466 yards. He run for 100. I think he had like 4 or 5 total touchdowns, I want to say. Oshkosh also didn't punt. It's kind of an interesting stat. But for the Blue Devils, though, Patrick Corcoran Evans,
Yep.
one of my good friends, had a 90-yard kick return, 7 receptions for 94 yards. Yeah, man, he had a heck of a game. Cannon Griner had 19 tackles on defense.
Damn.
And Matt Pometlo, the running back for the Blue Devils, 112 yards, 3 touchdowns. So
That's
he had a
big,
career.
dude. I mean, you score 46 points. You're going to have some dudes that are balling out. I mean, either side of it. You just come up just a few plays short here or there. Trey Tetzloff, also a single game record for the Titans with 17 catches on the day.
5 and a touchdown. Yeah, he had
17 grabs is very impressive.
Yeah, man, he had a great game. I think Levi Little, I want to say. None of his last name was Little. He had 2 touchdowns for the Titans as well. So, tip the cap to him. Also, you got to give credit where credit is due. His bitters,
London Little.
Yeah, London Little,
There you go.
Yeah, London Little, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it's my job as a D3 insider to talk about it all the good games, and this was one of them. So, yeah, this one hurts a little bit for sure.
I bet, dude. I mean, that's just an offensive explosion, from Oshkosh, who was, I believe, without one of their better receivers in Tony's estate.
Yeah, they didn't have him this week.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, Little stepped up for him. So.
Yeah, and that's what you need in a team like that. You need to have depth. You need to have guys who can step up. We can stop our WIAC talk at least for a little bit and move over to some MIAA, which we admittedly have not talked a whole lot about this year. A couple really good squads in there. 2 of them went head-to-head this weekend. Hope comes out on top of their matchup versus Albion 14-6. And, last year it was Albion and Alma, the 2 that went back and forth. Alma eventually coming up on top until they get knocked out by Aurora, I believe, in that second round of the playoffs. Hope this year looking to challenge the reigning champions with a big win over Albion, and now they've got Alma College at home. Alma's coming to their place next week, so I'm assuming this will be an MIAA title kind of matchup.
Yeah, I mean, this is arguably the number 1 marquee matchup of the year in that conference here coming up, so definitely keep your eyes on that one. Certainly. Excuse me.
Not a ton of crazy incredible output in this one. Obviously, a very defensive effort. I mean, it was 14-6. There wasn't anything.
Yeah, it's just black and blue.
Yeah.
MIAA football. Yeah.
That's what it is, dude. That's a great brand of football to play, especially for these guys. They've embraced it. This isn't the first time they've played this style of football. They had a ton of guys defensively who came up with some really big plays on both sides of the ball here. But looking at kind of key contributors, Hope, in between 3 different guys here, has 50 rushes on the ground. And that is a really good split. They did only finish with about 148 yards. But again, in this kind of tough game, you're looking to just eat clock and literally just be the last person holding onto the ball. If you look at the actual time of possession here, Hope did just that. And that'd be why they came out on top of it. 37 minutes to 23, Jimmy, in this one.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this previously on the podcast as well. When you have the ball for that long, you're going to win a lot of the time. So
absolutely. I mean, it's one of the best statistics to kind of look at. Another really good one, though, as far as Albion is concerned, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tackles for loss on the day, only 3 of them being sacks. So the Britons getting back in there, getting busy in the backfield over there.
Yeah. Yeah, getting busy might be an understatement, man.
Yeah, holy dude. Crap.
That's
incredible.
60 hours a week. No, it's not just busy. That's ridiculous.
They definitely have a tall task ahead of them in Alma College. Their quarterback, Carter St. John, was our D3 Offensive Player of the Week last week, not this week. But looking at that offense with the Scots and what they do very well, the thing is with Hope, they might have to keep up a little bit on that offensive side of things, but potentially the best thing you could do, they could argue, is just to keep the ball out of their hands, right? Keep the ball in their hands, sustain some very long drives, and keep that Scott offense off the field. Looking at some of their stats as far as this year, Alma's currently outscoring opponents 60-16 up to this point. This offense is incredibly high-powered.
Is that per game? They're scoring 60 a game?
That's, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, 59.6 to be exact, but I was wrong.
Oh, so not 60. No.
Yeah, right. Bullshit. Yeah. But I mean, they absolutely dominate as far as, especially, in the air and on the ground, both. They're very balanced. They're averaging almost 12 yards per attempt in the air and over 7 yards per attempt on the ground. And that is the epitome of balance, dude. Which is crazy, too, because they're actually on the short end of the time possession stick when it comes to their opponents. They've just been scoring quick and often.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you have to score quick if you're going to score that much. So,
So that'll definitely be one of our games to look at as far as this coming week is concerned. One that we wanted to mention, too, we had talked about it. Lebanon Valley, Widener, 27-24 in double OT. Lebanon Valley comes out on top of this one. That is a pretty wild contest. They improved to 4-1 overall, 4-0 in conference. So that's actually really strong win for them. They had two guys at the quarterback position getting it done between Tanner Lewis and Braden Bohannon, who had 13 and 16 attempts respectively. Both threw over 100 yards, no picks between the two of them. What an interesting kind of setup there, huh?
yeah, I mean, that's whatever helps you win games. I mean, ultimately, that's all that really matters.
They had 4 different defenders register at least part of a sack. And then you look at another team that was getting into the backfield early and often. That's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 10 tackles for loss on the day for Lebanon. That is dominant.
You're gonna win a lot of the time if you have 10 tackles for a loss. Because
Yeah.
that means you're just backing up the team on offense, gonna make it harder for you to first down. Like that's
Yeah, and I will say,
those
you would
tackles for losses
assume
add up. That
a
adds
team
up.
like that dominates the line of scrimmage. They only had 2 rushing first downs in the day. Lebanon was getting it done through the air and not really on the ground whatsoever.
Hey, I mean, like I said earlier, whatever the game plan has for you to win, I mean, you got to roll with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You see some of these stats that don't typically coincide with winning. The winning team was 3 of 12 on third down, and there's a couple other stats here like they didn't win the time possession. They didn't do this and
What
that.
was the
So
turnover ratio?
there are no true tells, right?
What was the turnover ratio?
Turnovers.
That's probably the number one stat. I mean, besides time of possession, I would say is turnover ratio and time of possession.
Yeah, there were no. There you are. 3 interceptions from Widener. That's it.
Maybe
That's
I know
it.
something.
Yeah.
I might know.
Yeah. 3 interceptions. That is big. No interceptions from the quarterbacks for LVC there. So that was a big one. The last one we kind of want to touch on before we talk rankings. John Carroll versus Marietta. One that I think snuck up on the Blue Streaks. It was in Ohio at Marietta. I guess they're both in Ohio, but it was in Marietta. And this one was probably way too close for a John Carroll team that we thought at one point might be potentially giving Mount Union a run for their money in the OAC. Probably not thinking along those lines anymore. But either way, what do you think about it?
I mean, if we're talking John Carroll giving Mount Union a run for their money, I think anything can happen any given Saturday. But
Fair?
yeah, I think if you want to beat teams like Mount Union, you got to take care of teams like Marietta. And that's not to say Marietta isn't a good football program, but you got to. I mean, when you only win by 3 against a team like that, you're probably not going to have the best game against Mount Union. But anything can happen any given Saturday. And John Carroll, pretty good program.
They are, and their only loss of the year, the only blemish on their 4-1 record was a 23-27 loss. That was the opening weekend against Whitewater.
Yeah, when you only lose to Whitewater by 4, it's okay. Now you can play with those kinds of teams.
Yep, dominated at Baldwin Wallace.
Yeah.
Dominated against Heidelberg.
I don't want them to see them like kind of play down to their opponent, if you will. I mean, not that they'd be playing too far down because, like I said, Marietta's pretty good, but
yeah,
I would expect them to win that game by like maybe 7 or 10 rather than 3.
I hear you. Yeah. Otherwise, a lot of the top 10 teams did handle business this week. We can talk about some of the new rankings. At least we talked about River Falls making the jump to number 4. So now you have River Falls at 4, followed by, as far as WIAC goes, La Crosse at 6 and Whitewater at 7. And then towards, where was it? No, I'm thinking different. Oshkosh is not top 25, are they?
No, they're not.
No. There you go. But otherwise, a lot of it really has remained the same.
They're good. Oshkosh is good. They probably should be ranked, if I'm being honest. That offense is really, really good.
Oh, I know the one that we were missing, Jim. I wanted to talk about that Ithaca game a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Ithaca won an overtime thriller against RPI, which is a pretty big matchup for them just about every year. It's like Raleigh Polytech Institute. I don't know what the hell. Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Holy shit. But that was a huge one for Ithaca on the road. You look at their schedule moving forward, Union College, University of Rochester, Buffalo State, St. Lawrence, and they finish the year out versus Cortland. You run the table as Ithaca right now, you have a great shot. Well, you're guaranteed if you run the table to win out or to get a bid into the playoffs, because their only loss comes at Johns Hopkins at week 1. That's a non-conference game. So they still have the Liberty League in front of them, and then that game against Cortland in the last week will be a very exciting one. But they had one guy, our D3 Defensive Player of the Week, that was making all kinds of plays in this one, Jim. Let me pull it up here. That being Jake Connolly. 11 tackles, 4 of them solo. He had a TFL. That was a sack and then 2 picks in this one at crucial times during the game. The only 2 interceptions for the Bombers. So that was huge. Otherwise, A.J. Wingfield, their preseason All-American quarterback, kept uncharacteristically quiet, 14 for 20 for only 100 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. On the ground, he did have 100 more yards, so that his attack was pretty balanced.
That kid was a dual threat, and because I've looked at the stat book a few times.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
yeah,
running for is obviously just an incredible game as a runner, at least.
Yeah. Receiving wise for RPI, they did a great job of spreading the ball out, but Ithaca it looked like kind of lacking that long explosive play. Their longest play on the day went for 31 yards as an offense, and that's something that I think their offense is definitely built more around those bigger explosive plays. When they're lacking that, they're going to be in a lot more tight games that they certainly don't want to put themselves in.
Yeah, and you want to have roughly 7 to 10 explosive plays a game. 10-plus yard runner and 15-plus yard pass be considered an explosive play by our explosive play standards here at Stout. Yeah, I mean, you want to have at least 7 to 10, I would say. So, and if you only have a handful, you're probably not going to score a ton of points.
I hear you. And worth noting, too, Grove City, still undefeated, 6-0. We talked about that win over Carnegie, and they're making some waves, man. They can make a real push here and be kind of make some noise in the postseason. They're currently sitting at number 23 in the rankings.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, right after Mary Hardin Baylor, who's 2-3. It's kind of funny, seeing that.
Right.
6-0. Yeah.
It's crazy, but they do very much value that strength of schedule that UMHB put themselves through, and I can't say I blame them. I don't know if they're still a top 25 in my book, but I get it. You know what I mean? I understand it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, either way though, if they win out, they're in. So
true.
Which is 3 losses. That's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, they deservedly so. The AIC is a pretty darn good conference. So
you got to go through Hardin Simmons.
Yeah.
That's it. But, yeah, that's all I really got for you tonight. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Kobe.
Sweet. I'll see you, brother. If you're still listening to this episode, I appreciate you. We covered a lot of football today. We'd like to mix in some more stuff. Sorry we didn't have any guests come on today, but we will be back later this week to preview potentially some of the best matchups yet this season. So thank you for tuning in. It's been D1 Rejects.